Hey everybody, welcome back to theclinicaltrialsguru.com. Again, that website address is www.theclinicaltrialsguru.com. I've been doing this for close to 4, actually probably right around 4 years exactly now. I started this blog in February 2010. It's since evolved into an interview show where I bring on what I call guest gurus. I have regular guest guru Darshan Kulkarni, who's an attorney and a pharmacist, coming on later this week. I have a lot of guest contributors. They write blog posts or they come on and get interviewed. And one of my favorite parts of the show, and it's kind of evolved into a podcast because I got a lot of feedback a couple years ago from people saying they enjoyed my videos, but they would like an audio only version. So I have a podcast. You can subscribe on iTunes, on Stitcher, and you can also listen to the audio only files on the blog itself, theclinicaltrialsguru.com. Again, it's theclinicaltrialsguru.com. But one of my favorite parts of what I do is answering your questions. I like to help research clinics out there discover everything it is that they want to know about clinical trials. And I don't claim to be a know-it-all. The site is playfully called Clinical Trials Guru, mostly because I hate that word guru, so it's kind of sarcastic. For people who know me, I'm pretty sarcastic. But this is all about research clinics and CROs. It's all about you guys, research professionals, and I hope you use this website to help you guys grow your businesses, your careers, just whatever it is you want to accomplish in this sometimes confusing industry. So I'm here to hopefully help and play my part. And if I don't know all the answers, I bring on guest gurus. So for a lot of these questions that I'm going to get into today, I may not have all the answers, and that's where I bring on guest gurus, and that's why I mentioned Darshan Kulkarni, who you've seen on my show. Those of you who've been following for a long time, you've seen him on a bunch of times. He's a regular guest contributor. So anyways, for those that don't know how this works, you send me your questions. You will be anonymous by default. If you want a shout out, let me know in the email. The email is dan@theclinicaltrialsguru.com, dan@theclinicaltrialsguru.com. You can also tweet me. I'm on Twitter. Just look up Dan Svera. Facebook, Instagram, just add me anywhere. LinkedIn is really good for clinical researchers. Add me there, and I'll keep you anonymous, but if you want your name out there, I will mention it. Just let me know in the email. So the first question today, and I'll keep it anonymous, says, "Hi Dan, thank you so much for making yourself available to ask questions in such a complicated field. I own a 8,500 square foot group home on 2 acres, and I won't disclose where. By zoning and designation, we can house up to 15 people with a common need for 30 days or more. We've been running a health retreat, but I'm very interested in using the place to conduct clinical research, and I think it's a fantastic place. I think that is a fantastic setting for an inpatient study. That's my opinion." Back to the email. "Our health programs are based on paleo, primal, wellness, lifestyle, diets. While doing this past year, I've become acquainted with a number of MDs and published PhDs in the field. While there have been numerous subjects and topics published pertaining to this diet and lifestyle, there has been no single definitive study as to its effectiveness. To that end, I would like to keep 15 subjects in-house and monitor to do a study to quantify results of following this dietary protocol. I'm relatively certain I could raise the money required to do the study within the community through crowdfunding, something like Kickstarter, I'm imagining. I think it would take about $500,000 to conduct the study, about half to the property to house, feed, and monitor the subjects, and the other half for the MDs, PhDs, and other expenses. There would be no drugs administered. The dietary guidelines would not be traditional, but neither would they necessarily be considered unsafe. I would have a local MD oversee the subjects regularly to ensure their health and safety. The PhDs would write up the protocols and dietary guidelines. Is this in any way feasible or realistic? Yes. And let me just add that I will bring on guest guru attorney and pharmacist Darshan Kulkarni, and we will re-examine this question. But in my opinion, it is feasible, it is realistic, and I don't necessarily think you even need to raise $500,000 for it. There's a whole sub niche in this industry, in the clinical trials industry, called nutraceuticals. And if you just look up the term nutraceutical on my blog, you'll see an interview I did with Manly Finch, I believe. And it's like a 45-minute interview or longer. I think it might actually be longer. And we discuss these kind of non-traditional clinical trials where they all do clinical studies on everything from the effects of green tea for certain conditions to just whatever it is, like special diets for diabetics, things like that. So in your case, it would be closer to a nutraceutical type of a trial, and those are done all the time. In addition to that, it would also probably have to be an investigator-sponsored trial. I've worked as a consultant with another group that is doing something similar to this. It's not for paleo. I can't give away too much of that information, but they kind of conducted a similar study for this in some place in the Northwest. And what they did was pretty similar. They had a house where they would have a certain amount of subjects in the house. They had to first write the protocol out. And I'm trying to figure out how to explain this without giving away what they did. But to keep the answer short, yes, it's possible. I'd be more than happy to work with you on this. And I think even beyond just doing your study, this group home that you have can actually be used to conduct clinical research of the traditional kind when you're not running these kind of studies. Because I can't imagine that you'll run a study like this that frequently. You probably just want to do enough of it to get your data and then possibly publish your data. And so those are the type of studies that will actually cost you money. And if you have a product or some kind of program or diet to sell, that's how you'll recoup your investment. But to do a traditional clinical trial when you're not doing these kind of studies in the same location would be a smart way to go about using this house that you have, which will now be an inpatient clinical trial phase 1 unit. So I think we can definitely talk some more about that if you're interested. I work with a lot of startup research clinics as a consultant or early stage investor, kind of like a VC does, where I'll come in and take some minimal amount of sweat equity. But we can definitely do something like that, and I think it's very possible to do, and it's done all the time in the nutraceutical space. So look up nutraceutical on my blog. And as far as the regulatory guidelines, again, like I said, this would be an investigator-initiated clinical trial. So you would not have to publish the results to the FDA because you're not looking for FDA approval. It sounds like you're just looking for data for yourselves to use later as marketing or just to have something published. But let me know and email me back, and I'll definitely look forward to speaking with you more. But good question. We have some interesting viewers out there. Here's another question. It says, "Hi Dan, I'm from India. I have a major in microbiology. Recently, I finished a clinical research course for 2 months. I'm going to attend an interview by the end of next week. Could you tell me the important questions asked in an interview?" So if you're going to be a clinical research coordinator, go on my blog and do a search for interview or do a search for study coordinator job, and you'll get a lot of videos that I made about what kind of questions they ask you. They usually, the way I interview employees or potential employees is I ask them why they like clinical research. What are they passionate about? Specifically, what kind of clinical research are they passionate about? I own a clinic. I own a few clinics that conduct psychiatric trials, neurology trials. So I try to ask them, why are you so passionate about psychiatry, or why are you so passionate about neurology? If I was running an oncology research clinic, I would ask the same thing. So do your homework beforehand of who's going to be interviewing you. You should know everything you can about that company. And if you could, definitely check out their website. And in order to be prepared for the questions they ask, those are the top several questions they're going to ask. The next one is going to be, what are your future plans in research? Do you plan on just working here for a year and then leaving? Because someone who's brand new in research, I don't know many companies that are willing to invest a year in training you and then only to have you leave as soon as you're starting to pay off. You're an investment. When you're an employee for a company, when they hire you, you're an investment for them. So they don't want to just put all the hard work and money into training you, and then as soon as you're starting to get good at your job, leaving. So they want to make sure that you're going to be there for at least 2 years. But look at their website, look at what they do. I would go on clinicaltrials.gov and look at some studies that they could possibly conduct. Sometimes you can find some studies that the research clinics are conducting. You can get creative. You can look at if you're doing schizophrenia trials, for example. You go on clinicaltrials.gov and look up schizophrenia trials. And then on their website, I'm sure you can find some of their PIs. So you can see if those PIs are conducting those studies. You can talk to them about the protocols. That would be amazing. So far that's never happened at one of my clinics, but if I had a potential employee bring a printout of the studies that we're doing from clinicaltrials.gov, because most of this stuff is public information. It just takes a little extra work to find, but if you do that and bring out a printout of the studies that they're doing from clinicaltrials.gov and tell them why you're interested in joining those kind of studies or why you're interested in working on those kind of trials and coming with strategies for how you can recruit patients or how you're going to go about conducting some of the study procedures or assisting with the study procedures, that would be amazing. So far, I've yet to see that happen. So for those of you out there in the same boat, do that. Clinicaltrials.gov is your friend. Next question. This one is about Instagram. So it says, hi Dan, how do I do Instagram on my PC? Is it only a phone app? So this is from someone who's running a research clinic, and I always talk to you guys about being on social media. And Instagram is a great way to communicate with potential patients, potential study participants in your area, especially at a local level. You don't want to just put pictures about clinical research because you're going to run out of stuff to post, but just stuff about your neighborhood, about your community. You can do that. And if you become like a center of influence for your neighborhood, you can much more easily recruit study participants. Later on, Gary Vaynerchuk wrote a book called Jab, 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 Right Hook. So taking a picture of something cool in the neighborhood or a new restaurant or a good coffee spot in your neighborhood, that's called a jab. Then you do enough jabs and then you can eventually do a right hook where you post a picture of something research related and say, hey, we're enrolling for this kind of study. You're much more likely to get engagement with that kind of a post as opposed to just constantly putting out right hooks or just constantly putting out information that's designed to sell, tactics to sell. Don't do that. But back to your question, Instagram on your PC, it is possible. I've tried to do it. It's very difficult to do. You need to download a few programs, which I just don't have patience for. So I use my phone for Instagram. And if you work at a research clinic and you're in charge of Instagram, you can have a separate app, or you can just keep signing in and out. Like if you don't want to use your personal Instagram for your work-related Instagram duties, you can just you'll have to keep logging in and out and use your phone or your tablet. But if you absolutely must use a PC. It is possible. There's just some programs you need to download, and I don't know what those programs are. Here's another one. Let's see. Where was it? There was a couple more good ones. Here's one. Hi, Dan. Good morning, all the way from New Zealand. So big shout out to our clinical research viewers in New Zealand. I've just discovered your site, and I enjoy your feedback. Thank you for that. My background is clinical studies with a large number of study participants, which I've had no problem managing. However, I've changed jobs recently and now work for a company which is growing, and they want to get more studies. So my question is, how do you incorporate all studies on a calendar that's easy to follow? I don't know what they use in New Zealand, but clinicaltrials.gov, you can search for studies in New Zealand, so that's a good way for you to go get studies that are currently recruiting. Just go on there and do a search for New Zealand and the kind of studies you want. How do you incorporate all studies on a calendar that's easy to follow? At a small site like yours, which seems like a startup, I use Google Calendar for all my staff at some of my clinics. At some of the other ones, we've gotten other software that we pay for, but Google Calendar is perfect for the purposes of just putting all the studies in the calendar, study visits, just organizing everything, breaking down each visit into, for each specific protocol, like when does this patient come in, and you can just use the patient initials or their identifying number, so you don't break any HIPAA laws, because it is a cloud-based platform. Google Calendar is a must, and also Google Drive. Use that shared drive so that all your staff members can access the same documents. Definitely set up a Google Calendar and a Google Drive system through Gmail. So create a work-related Gmail for all your staff members, and invite them all to have access to the calendar and the Google Drive for your startup. Number two, the second question is, what's the method you use to break down all cost, staff, hours when looking at prospective research trials? So the first thing I do is the overhead, automatically off the bat, 30%. The next thing I do is I look for each specific procedure that study is going to entail, and I see what I'm used to paying my staff members to do. So if it's a physical exam, I know it's going to be like $100. If it's a specific rating scale that someone has to do, I know it's going to be X amount of dollars. I use an Excel sheet, and I use all my budgets that I've had for like 10 years that I've been doing this, and I find an average cost for each procedure, and I try to always negotiate up. But the first thing I start with is the overhead. So use Excel for that. That's what I use. Here's last question. I think it's the last one for today. There's a lot, so keep them coming, guys. Oh, here's one. It's not a question. Hey, Dan, as usual, good job with the videos. I was trying to make an Excel sheet of all your videos. I stopped at 200 videos. Do you have a list which is handy? Here's the list I created. So thank you for the list. I'm going to actually put that one somewhere on the blog. But no, I don't. I know it's more than 200. Most of them are on YouTube, but some of them are not. Like some from the early days are not on YouTube. Some from the early days are on some other people's YouTube accounts. This is when I just first started. So there's probably like close to 400, maybe 500 videos. But this Excel sheet is pretty crazy to look at. But that's what happens after 4 years of just constantly doing videos. Last question. Hi Dan, thank you so much for your videos. I'm a new subscriber and I have a couple of questions I specifically searched for on your site. Does the principal investigator or owner of the investigator site have to apply for the CLIA certification? Who else involved is eligible to apply for one? So the PI does not have to apply. The research clinic has to have one. And at least in the state of California, if you can get a CLIA waiver. That's what they're called. If you do under a certain amount of labs per year, which most research clinics should qualify for, you just need one owner signature on the CLIA application and one MD to supervise the lab or the clinic. So that MD does not have to be the PI, but it should be an MD that is there a certain amount of hours per month or per week. So check your state requirements for that. If it's California, it's 40 hours a week. If the private practice associated, and that doesn't mean that MD has to be there 40 hours a week, but he has to supervise. So it does not have to be the owner or the PI of the site that applies for the CLIA. It's the clinic itself, the entity, the business, the corporation that gets the CLIA certificate or the CLIA waiver. It does not depend on the PI. Second question, if the private practice associated with the clinical trial investigator site has lost their CLIA license due to sanctions, may the clinical trial business still qualify for one? There are two different businesses with the same owner, which is the PI. The answer is yes. Like I said, the legal entity, which is the corporation, which under U.S. law is considered as an individual. So it sounds funny, but the corporation is treated like an individual. It has its own equivalent to a social security number, which is the employer identification number or the tax ID number, whatever it is that you call it. It's separate. Each business is separate. If the PI himself was banned from the last CLIA waiver, they might have a hard time approving him or her, but you can try it again. Send the CLIA waiver application for the research clinic, and if you have problems with your current PI, if they don't approve him for whatever reason, but they should, get another person who's an owner or a part owner, or maybe another MD who's going to supervise the lab to sign the waiver or the CLIA application. It does not have to be the PI, but what I would do is try it that way first with your PI. If they don't approve that, have another MD sign off on it. It doesn't have to be an owner. Hopefully this helps. I want to give all my clinical trial guru producers a shout out. It's Sarah Elizabeth Siegler, Resolve Research Solutions, Accurate Clinical Trials, Erdhart Clinical Trials, PTNR, Patrick Stone, Darshan Kulkarni, Biopharm Systems, Zymewire, Mozio, South Coast Clinical Trials, Breakthrough Clinical Trials, St. Paul Medical Research Center, Investigator Research Group, Phlebotomy Services. If you want to be a clinical trial guru producer, let me know. And keep your questions coming. Dan at theclinicaltrialsguru.com. Dan at theclinicaltrialsguru.com. Thank you very much.